Welcome to Kevjet the Podcast, country music artist Patrick Massey.
Hello, thanks for having me.
Joining us from my homeland of Canada.
You can see I've got especially today, with the craziness of the U.S. administration, and I don't even like to say his name. I'm like, I'll pull a Whoopi Goldberg, No, the guy in the White House, the prime minister's encouraged everybody, and it's important. I was kind of, quite frankly, ashamed of the flag because of the atrocities against the Indigenous community. And so I haven't really worn the maple leaf in quite a while, actually. But it's important right now to show the world how sovereign of a country Canada is and how powerful of a country we are. And they're finding out pretty quickly.
What is the vibe today?
People, I think, are very concerned. I think Canadians, for the most part, were quite educated about what tariffs would do, but Americans weren't. And I think that the news, I watch so many independent newses in a day because, I contribute on CTV a lot and I have to know what's going on. And I like to have an open opinion on what's actually the portrait of the world, right? And so, yeah, they're freaking out because, and especially now, they're targeting all the Republican states. Like they're already the least funded states because they don't want any government, any tax. Well, then you don't have anything. I'm a firm believer. If I'll pay more tax if I get more, I don't have a problem with that. But that's what I don't think that they just don't understand that somebody like President 47, I'll say, he will never, ever feel the effects of what he's doing. He doesn't care because he has more money than he'll ever need. And people like that never care about people like us because they have never been where we are and they never will be. And that's why I find it so unbelievable that people will support people like that. They're basically screwing you right to your face. And they're still, it's like the MAGA, it is a cult. It is because how can you not see what's happening? And that's the thing is that we've always looked at the United States. You're Canadian, like the only country in the world that has 15 court TV shows in a day. They sue each other. We've always looked at and the world has I think maybe Americans are starting to actually realize that now. But what was it? The stats, 5% for a long time had a passport. Now it's maybe 17. It's not, they don't leave the States. And I think that they're starting to realize, whoa, this is intentional why they've done this, right? If you keep people uneducated, that's what happens, right? And you create an enemy all the time. It's like,
and their actions affect the world. That's the problem as well.
Well, but the free world's responding very, very quickly. I kept saying people will find out how serious and how sovereign Canada is. And then he posts a thing today about the 51st state again. He's just like, how dare you?
I had so many text messages from friends today about that comment. It just reminds me, I don't even reply. I'm just like, I can't even go there.
Yeah, well, you can't. I've had so much thrown at me my whole career, my whole life, because coming out, I don't know of the first, but I don't know of any. I know of other men in the genre that never ever they gave up because it was so difficult before me. And I know a lot of them were Canadian, actually. There was like Lavender Country, or like Patrick, right? But he was an alternative act. He was not a mainstream country act. Like I was in 1998, April 5th, when my first CD came out, first single, Let's Talk About Love. It started charting within 3.5 weeks, top 10 around the world. It was like boom. And it was an indie record. It was unheard of in a major label dominated industry. People were like, who is this kid? Who is he? I believe in fate and destiny, right? I don't believe in luck or fluke or coincidence. I think people sell themselves short. I think it is very obvious why everybody was put here. And there's only one commonality that we all share on this planet as human beings. And it amazes me, other than our organs and things, right? But people don't get it. I'm like, do you know what it is? Because I always have to have a soundbite when I'm on the news, or I'm like, how can I simplify this down? It's like, it's the fact that we're all unique entities. So why is anybody telling any other human being that they don't get to be who and how they are? Or, if you're 7 and you're straight, you're fine. But if you're anything else, you're mentally ill. Like, forget it. It is so wrong. If we weren't put here to be who and how we are, why the hell are we here?
Exactly. Exactly.
But I don't know why they can't understand that, or why you're fighting. Why are you so concerned about something that you say has nothing to do with you? But you're obsessed. Like this man the other day, I said, listen, sir, I don't even know who you are, but you stuck your nose into my activism. I said, listen, sir, I'm not straight, but I'm certainly not obsessed with straightness. But I'm also certainly not trying to stop straight people from being straight. And I said, that's what you're doing. Do you realize what you're doing? Like,
it's so true.
It's it's privilege.
It is.
That's privilege. They can't even handle this much animosity. What about, we've been dealing with, I said to this guy that you couldn't handle my life for 5 seconds.
It's so true. It's so true. So let's go back to your story, because it's quite interesting. Like you said, your first single started charting all across the world. You had a record. Was it a record deal or an offer?
Honestly, my first record deal I got offered when I was 14. And it was with if you remember the West End Girls.
Yeah.
So the same company was, I'm not going to say, but, and I remember I was 14 and it was like, and I should back up a little bit. So I'm starting to write a memoir, right? And I didn't really realize when I became an activist, but I just realized. So when I was 8 years old, I was in grade 3, and my teacher in front of the entire class, he screamed at me, said, you stupid boy, you're such a bad reader. You can't be in any group. Go face the corner by yourself. You stupid boy. And I was like, it devastated me. And then shortly after that, I was being assessed for dyslexia. I'm one of 7 kids, and my parents had 7 kids in 9 years. And we grew up in Vancouver, in the city. There's a book about our house. Like, it was the only 8-bedroom house, and 5 boys, 2 girls. And BC, the Catholic schools are not funded 100%. They're 50% funded by the families, right? Tuition. So it was not, I don't know how my parents did it, honestly. It was something like $3,000 for this assessment, right? And I remember hearing my mom saying and Dr. and Mrs. Klein, they were the leading experts at the time. And people, I don't know if most people don't understand, the onset of dyslexia started when they changed from phonetics to sight reading in schools, right? And that was really when it started affecting a lot of people, right? And there's actually a school in Vancouver, St. George's, that never changed from phonetics. They have no issues with dyslexia in their school. I heard my mom, and I vividly remember this, saying, what can we do for Patrick? And Dr. Klein said, you better find out what he's good at, and you better damn well encourage him. And then so my parents went back to the school, Corpus Christi, it was a Catholic school, and said, we'll pay for every teacher to learn the Orton-Gillingham method. That was the multisensory approach. They still don't, to this day, train teachers to detect dyslexia, which I find unreal. But so my parents went back to the school and said, we'll pay for every teacher in the school to learn this method, and it will only help Patrick. It won't only help, it'll help everyone. And they said no. So my parents had to hire a tutor. And other than my parents, and we were talking about Terry Fox and Ingrid Vincent, my tutor was my first hero, because so then my mom had to go back to work when my youngest brother was 4, because they had to hire this tutor. You know what they did? They put us in a storage closet under a stairwell. How would a kid learn? And my tutor, she went to the principal and she said, this is a Catholic school, and this is how you treat a kid with a learning disability. This is not a Christian atmosphere. And I thought that was the coolest fucking thing I'd ever seen. And from that moment on, I was like this little tyrant. I was like, it didn't matter who it was, parents, teachers, cops. I would stop 4 17-year-old teenagers. I was 9. You're not doing that. That's right. And everybody like, oh my God, what are we going to, if Patrick finds out, he's not going to let us do this. And I didn't really realize what I was doing. And now that I'm thinking, because I'm with my long COVID thing, my memory's going, and I've had a lot of complications in the last 4 years, and it's been awful. So I'm trying to document everything that I can remember. But I said to my mom, I can't believe I was like, and it just led me down this road. And getting back to it, so then I expressed interest. I wrote a song, and my mom, bless her, she was a nurse, and she she was such an eavesdropper. I mean, you know, but and she overheard one of her patients talking to her son who just come back from this international music competition, and Hugh Pickett was a big promoter and out in the West Coast. And he brought Elvis and the Beatles and all this, and he brought this guy over. And so my mom said, "Oh, you know, my son he's expressing interest in music, and would you meet him?" And I ended up meeting him. His name is Brian Olander, and he was really the first person I started songwriting with. And so my parents, they had no idea if I could sing or anything, right? And then I entered the P&E talent competition, and no one had ever heard me sing. I was singing, you know, with a brush in my room or whatever. And I was 14, and I did the song. It was called, I can't remember what it was called now, but We Were Friends or something. And there, my dad was in the front. He was like, they couldn't believe how good I was.
Wow.
And it was like, and they were shocked. And then, so Bryant and I started writing and recording, and it started to move really fast. And we were called New Generation. And we were in talks to tour the New Kids on the Block. Like, it was a big, and then it was like, he was 19, I was 14, and he was older than me. And he, you know, those are primitive ages for people, right? And so he bailed on the whole, and I was devastated. I was like, I had gone to this vocal coach before. That's another reason how we sort of connected. Jan Cooper, he was the biggest. He did Loverboy, he did everybody, and I was like, I went to him. I said, it was $50 an hour, right? Which was a shit. I said, I have $150, so you have to tell me in 3 lessons what I need to do, and that's it. My parents have no money, and so he did, and he said, listen. He said he taught me, which was one of the best things I ever learned, was the chi exercises they teach in karate, and you do that because we start breathing up here, right? And when you're singing, you need to breathe. So I laid down in the studio and listened to this to him, started learning how to breathe like a baby. And he said, and sing songs that are too high and too low, and expand. And I did, and I did that for years. Like, from the time I was 14 to 18, I was singing probably 7 hours a day. I was just a nonstop. But in between all that, the stuff with Bryant, and then I had to do my first, you should look at my website, see my first photo shoot when I was 14. It was like this raging little mo. Like, and Victor Denzo was his name. He did all the TV guides, and I'd never done a photo shoot. And I went, and he's like, and he couldn't believe it. He's like, says to my mom, is your son done this? He's like, no, this is the first. She's like, really? He's a natural. Like, it was just like, and so I had to, and then I got these people started, I think I was auditioning for a telethon or something. And then these people got wind of me at this label, and I thought, and then they started phoning me, right? And I thought, here, something's really, really wrong with these two men. They're grown ass men calling a 14-year-old boy, and they're asking to speak to my parents. I'm like, what a bunch of weirdos, right? I was just like, I mean, I was about 14 going on 40. Like, that was the first time I turned a record. I said, I'm not signing that record deal. He said, you don't know what you're doing. I said, oh, I know exactly what I'm doing. That's why I'm not signing that record deal. And slam the phone down like a little bitch, 14. And I ran into that man years later. He said, I thought you were he said, but we were going to rip you. I said, of course you were. You're two grown ass pervs calling a 14-year-old boy and asking to speak to the parents. I said, what was your first clue? I said, he's like, how did you? I said, I just knew, man. I said, I've always known. I said, I've always, and my brother said that when one of my brothers got sober, and he said, how did you know in this family? Like, we grew up very strict Catholic, but my parents were, my dad's passed on now, but they were real Christians. Like, I never did not know one day that I was not loved by them. Even when I came out at 19, I remember I told all of my family one day, and I said, my dad was in his bed getting ready for bed. And I said, Dad, if I meet someone, I want to bring him home for dinner. Is that okay? And he said, yes, son, that's great. Even though I knew he didn't agree with it or think it was right, but that's what a Christian does, right? They don't judge anybody. And all this stuff now, there's nothing Christian about it. This Christian nationalism, they're adoring this is why they came to North America, right? Originally, because they wouldn't let them do that shit in Europe. My first producer made this comment when I was in Nashville the first time. He said, I've turned my cheek so many times I'm spinning. I didn't know what that meant then, but I do now. And it's difficult. Like I said to my mom, if we turn to dirt, I'm going to find you. I'm going to be pissed because you said there's something. If there's nothing, I'm going to be so mad. I'm the one in my family who did what my parents, I told the truth. And my other siblings, and then I'm the one who's screwed. Like it's like there's something wrong with our world when you see people like the president of the United States and the owner of Twitter. They have all this money and all this, and it's like, and then people that do the good work, the work that needs to be done, we're treated the worst. Perception equals fact, but it doesn't.
It doesn't. But you stood up for yourself because, well, so some people would probably have asked this question. So you decided in true Patrick Massey fashion to say, you know what, I'm not going to lie about who I am for a record deal. And I'm going to be who I am. And some people would turn that around and just say, well, why wouldn't you just keep your mouth shut and take the deal?
Until there's very few people that will ever be led into a room, and I don't mean egotistically, and offered a multi-million-dollar record deal. There's a very select few people on this planet, quite frankly. So, and I always say, well, when you get there, you tell me. The thing is that I never talked about my orientation. I mean, I came out in 1994 after I graduated high school. I was 19. And I never, and you ask anybody, if there was somebody I would stand my ground. But I didn't think that I was talented or on the radio or singer-songwriter because I was gay. It's because I was talented.
Exactly.
And I remember the first competition I entered, and the only one I ever entered, was at the Cloverdale Rodeo. It's a big rodeo on the West Coast here. And the judge was big. He was a big radio disc jockey on the big country station, and his son was screaming up the charts. He was so afraid because I was so good and I had done nothing that I was going to compete with his son or take away. He fixed the whole competition, so I couldn't move forward. And my parents and we were shocked. It was just like, wow. And then, but then it was then that was when Ray said, "You're never entering another." And competitions are silly. I mean,
yeah,
it's like even like American and like The Voice. I was offered an audition. That's not real. That stuff, and it's just. But I just thought, like I never really thought much of it. There was another young guy from Burnaby started. We started together, Michael Bublé and I. We were together. Michael played at the Babalu. I did my second CD release there. And Blaine and Vance were very instrumental. They owned all the nightclubs in Vancouver, and there was a real camaraderie between Michael and I. He was big band and I was country. And I remember I'd walk in and he'd be like, "Ladies and gentlemen, the future of country music," right? And then when it was very interesting, he started to. It was actually Brian Mulrooney really was begging David Foster to come and see him at his right. And it's so funny because and David, I don't know if you ever met him, but he's like, yeah, whatever. You see, nothing phases him, right? Because he's seen everything. And then he said, "Oh," and when he saw, he was like, "Wow!" And it was funny too because even Bruce Allen, who was a big manager, right? He said, "Oh, I'll never manage." Like Harry Connick, and then 5 years later goes by, and then when David started working with him, he needed to get a new manager, and Beverly Dellett, who managed him from the beginning. And it was funny because Michael was in that same competition where Bryant was, right, at the P&E, and he kept begging Beverly, "Manage me," and her famous line was, "Michael, 15% of nothing is nothing." And she used to always say that, and she was so strict. And her and my manager worked together, right? So that's sort of how we started working together. And so then when Michael went on, and then 5 years later, Bruce, I'll manage Michael Boo. Like it's like, but that's what an assertive person does, right? They change their mind as many times as they see fit based on new factual information. And so then when Michael went on to there, then I just remember Beverly. And if you would have met this one, if you met her, she was very like, I wouldn't mess with her. You know what I mean? Like one of those, and very strict and stern, but had a heart of gold and worked her ass off. Right. And so so they had Silver Lining Management. And then Bruce said, "Oh, you go to the spa now. You're done. You got Michael." And she's thinking like, "I'm not done." So then she called me up and she said, and I was begging her to manage me, right? Because I saw what she was doing for Michael, right? And she wouldn't do any work with anybody really else until she got Michael, but she knew she could take him to a point, and then she had to let him go. So then she called me one day, said, "Come over to my house. Don't say anything. Walk in. I'm going to be in my living room and just with my eyes closed and sing a cappella." And so I went and I did, I did like, "I cried a tear, you wiped it," like Anne Murray. And she's like, "Okay." And then she phoned Michael and said, "Well, we've got our first artist that and who's that?" And said, "Patrick Massey." "Well, this will be interesting." And I thought, that was an odd comment, I thought. And then, so that's kind of how, and then that was how it led me to that. I had been offered another deal in between that, Nashville, big deal. And then that was the big thing that was going to happen in Nashville because Bruce Allen managed Michael Bublé and Martina McBride. And it was just, and then I don't know what went down, but I never talked about my personal life, but somebody else did. And then I was kind of like kiboshed and said, if you don't sanitize your gayness, however the hell you do that, and become property and own it. And people don't understand, when you sign a record deal, you literally become their property. You no longer own your life. You can't hang around who you want. You can't talk to who you want. Yeah. And people really don't understand, the amount of, and I thought, I can't, like the little raging Mo from 8 that was, I was a truth teller. I didn't realize then. I was like, I'm not doing that. And that was the end. It was literally like, and then I remember leaving and I'm thinking, but it was like literally overnight. Then there was a magazine called Outlooks, and this guy was calling me for years to do this interview. I didn't tell my new manager I moved back to Canada. I went to this interview, and it covers no tears in his beer. And my manager, Clark, said, well, I guess you're out of the closet. And it was literally overnight. I was blacklisted, like kicked off every radio station, television, other than CTV. VTV was VTV. They were the only one, and Rogers. There was a Rogers Community Television. There was Michael Eckford and Fiona Forbes. They were big. They had a big show. They were the only two, but literally every, I couldn't even get a booking for 3 years. I never thought I would still be living in poverty. Now I have nothing but my name. I had to book myself, manage myself, produce myself. I had to do everything because nobody would work. Like I'm telling you, there's a lot of people like in the business, like big people. They were too afraid because I was like a fucking unicorn. There was no other major like top 40 country artist who had charted that as a man. I mean, there still isn't one to this day in Nashville that's signed. Yes, there's like ones like Orville Peck and that stuff, but they're not, the establishment is not supporting that. And they never have. And that is completely and utterly wrong. And it's not acceptable. But it's like country music was, if you're not white and straight, no. And it's like, even like there was no, like black people pretty much invented all kinds of music and everything. Right. And there was no, like, as if there was, you think Charlie Pride was the only black country singer, or Darius Rucker? And it's like, I remember during a few years back when I heard the Reba, I'm a survivor. I heard this song and I was on Twitter and I was, that's not real. I looked at it, it was this big black woman. I was like, who the hell? None of them are like black and in country. And her name's Brittany Spencer. I was enamored with this. I could not stop listening. And so I started posting it everywhere. I sent her a message. I said, listen, I'm enamored with you. And I said, you're, and then she has a song called Compassion, and I couldn't stop listening to it. This is all during the pandemic, right? And I was really, really sick with COVID. I mean, I almost died of COVID. So I lost my voice for over a year. I never thought I'd be able to sing again. So I had a lot of time on my hands. And she said, well, I noticed you. Your message to me. What do you mean I'm messaging? She's like, every black country singer knows who Patrick Massey is in Nashville because you opened all the doors. And I was like, what? I didn't have a clue. I never looked behind me because I was trying to survive.
Yeah.
And I didn't even know until recently there's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of queer country singers. I didn't have a clue because it was lonely out there. And it was when there was a lot of artists that were. And I mean, I knew a lot of them, but it's not anybody's. And here's the thing, and I say this a lot. I try to say it a lot to people. Queer people don't out other queer people. Okay. That's like a straight people thing because they don't know the ramifications. Mm-hmm. Some people, it's death. Like, when people, honor killings or the countries that come, like it is not anything to play around.
I think people don't understand that every time you meet a new friend or you start a new job or it's just a new person in your circle, the first thing they ask is, oh, are you in a relationship? Are you married? Do you have a wife? So you're coming out every time you meet a new person. And for someone who's
they assume you're straight.
Exactly. For someone
you're not even allowed to ask people those things, like especially in a workplace,
But it's it can be really traumatic for someone who was traumatized for that during that process.
Who you can tell or who you're gauging all the time. Like, is this person going to ruin my life? And then being in the public eye and being so young for so long. I don't know if you know who Ted North is, but Ted North was instrumental in the decriminalization of homosexuality in Canada. And I mean, he is one of my personal heroes. And I think of Ted all the time. And I think, what he went through, like in 1958, him and four brave others stood on the steps of the courthouse in Vancouver. And it was a crime to dress in drag. He had to wear 3 pieces of male clothing. So wear 2 male socks, his breast male underwear, and full drag with the sign, I am a human being. Ted was relentless. He was power calling Pierre Elliott Trudeau, the justice minister, and said, you have to do this. You have to decriminalize homosexuality. And he was on him. Like, this is a man whose name, address, and telephone number were publicized 24 times on the cover of the Vancouver Sun. He was run out of 24 homes, institutionalized, shock therapy, almost lobotomized. And he then started the Dogwood Monarch Society, the court in Canada. He was the first Empress of Canada. And the night that Pierre finally got it through the House, he's called Ted the first call. Well, Your Majesty, we've done it. And it was like, and I knew who Ted was. And he was sick. I knew he was sick. And a friend of mine who I met when I moved back to Vancouver from Alberta the first time, you're good. But him and his mom started the Q Hall of Fame. The Q was the Queer Hall of Fame Awards. And so I met him and Connie Smudge. And so he invited me to come and sing at the last one that it was actually Ted's last public appearance and in Toronto, at the Toronto Board of Trade. And I was like, Ted North, like, and it bothers me when people don't like, there's a lot of people in our community that don't know what people gave up, man, for us to have what we have. And, I was so nervous. And I remember walking into the champagne reception before the thing and Ted turning and said, well, you're the young man everyone's talking about. And I started bawling my eyes. I said, I have my life because of you, sir. Like we embraced, and I only remembered this very recently. And that night after his speech that he did, just, my God, everybody was in tears. And I remember that night after the party, and after the event, and we were in the Paul's, he had a big suite, and Ted and I had a very intimate conversation on the couch. And he said, he leaned into me, he said, you know, this human rights thing you're doing, Patrick, it's never going to pay you. And the community that you're helping is not even going to respect you, but you have to do this. And he said, I'm dying and I'm passing my baton. So I didn't remember, my friend said, do you realize the magnitude?
Through it all, you're still moving forward. You have an album that you're working on. You have a single coming out. You're still moving forward.
Well, yeah, you find ways to continue to move forward. I mean, and now I have an opportunity with Corey and Jenna. Like they run a production company here, and they're just they don't have. They're gonna, we're gonna write some stuff together, and my other songs that I have. And I said, well, I want to do these covers. It's kind of what I've started. I remember this one time. Like the country station, the one in Vancouver, and JR, it was the largest country station in Canada. And when my first CD came out, my parents, like I said, we didn't have money, but we were doing my CD release concert, and we had to sell like 400 seats or something, right? And so they convinced my parents to buy this advertisement. It was like $2,000 or something, and my parents couldn't afford it. And then we sold out the theater, so we canceled it, and they held that against me, and they would never ever play me on that radio station. And it was interesting because the DJs would talk about me. They would host my events. Like it was like, but they were forbade from ever playing me. And it was then one of my friends was the community director, and somebody bowed out the night before. They did this every Christmas, this Basics for Babies thing, where they out in Surrey, just out of Vancouver, where they had, performances and people brought toys and all this stuff. And so she called me like 11 p.m. and said, can you come at 6 a.m.? And I was like, yeah. And it was on that station, right? And the two morning hosts were very fond of me and stuff, and they talk about me, and they always felt they all felt bad. So they couldn't play me, right? And I was like, my first and second single were charting like top 10. It was like, Calgary was one of the biggest. They played me out of the gate, Country 105, which was unheard of, right? But I remember that was just about to go on stage, and I was so nervous because I didn't have a musician. I was doing it to tracks on the radio, and it was back then. It wasn't like now, right? It was like anything it's sending it to the station, and anything could go wrong, and you're like, oh my God. And then I remember hearing Tamara. I remember her. She was on the phone with the program director, this guy, and I heard him say, "Why is that fucking faggot singing at our station?" And she started to cry and she was like, and I was tearing up and I had to get on that stage 3 seconds later and perform. And just like nothing that happened to me all the time. And people witnessed it all the time and they did nothing. I remember I couldn't even get a nomination in BC. I've been in country music since 1998. I've never been invited to perform at one country music festival, ever. I never stopped producing top 40 country music. I never stopped. I never left the genre. The Gay Rodeo in Calgary booked me. And that to open for Farmer's Daughter, I think was what saved my career. I started getting some stuff, work on the gay rodeo circuit, and I quickly realized it was the second largest rodeo circuit in the world. It was huge. It was in every American city. And then I was in Dallas doing the rodeo finals. I busted my ass for years. And then I got all these bookings. And then Ty came out and they canceled all of mine, gave them to him. And then what can I say? Because if I say anything, I'm this non-supportive asshole. Years later, 2020 was supposed to be one of my biggest summers finally in my career. And I said to my mom, a fucking global pandemic? Are you the world shutting down? I was doing, I don't know if you know what Rainbow Refugee is. It's yeah. So I was doing a friend of mine, Zabko. He was actually saved by that. He was moments from death and he got in a car and got to the airport. And when I met him, it inspired me. So I started doing a lot of advocacy for them. And we were doing a fundraiser in Vancouver. And there was Jen Mickey, bless her heart. She was a straight woman, was such an ally. She had 2 queer clubs in Vancouver. And we were going to do this fundraiser. And then the Junos were in Vancouver that year. And I said to my manager, I can't believe them. I said, so the Juno Fest, they booked the largest queer venue in Vancouver and they didn't invite one queer artist to be involved. I said, can we put on the first LGBT showcase? So I went and I got 3 other, I knew some performers here in Vancouver. And Juana Stiles, she's a Two-Spirit First Nations trans woman. She's screaming up the chart. She's doing really, really well now and stuff. And it was interesting too, because she, I know how difficult my life's been being an openly gay man, but the abuse that trans people take is unreal. And I remember like Juana was like, and I don't know what that's like to go through that, with the hormones, and it must screw you over. And myself included for many years, we self-medicated. We took, we did drugs and all kinds of shit because, people don't realize the enormous amount of trauma that queer people go through. Like you were saying earlier, you constantly are always worried.
I just want to move into my famous Kevjet quickfire questions. And I think you're going to have a great time with them. In fact, I know you will.
I'm just shy though.
Yeah, I can tell.
That's like Funny Smudge of Dragon Jet. I'm just little. Yeah.
Let's start with, okay, so Kevjet's quickfire questions. What was your first job?
I worked at the PNE actually when I was 13.
What's your favorite word?
Peace.
What has been your favorite age so far?
Oh, man. Well, that's a hard question to answer. I don't know. I mean, how would I answer that? I think you're like right around 35 was a good, I mean, I think, as my friend Jeff used to say, you don't even get your brain till you're 35. It's interesting how when you're young, you want to get older. And then when you're older, you want to be younger. But I don't really feel like I want to be younger. You're wise enough to allow yourself to be wise. So a lot of people get sillier as they get older.
Yeah, I love turning 40. I couldn't wait for that. And
40, yeah.
Yeah, in a couple of days I'm going to be 45 and I'm happy with that. So
yeah,
I like getting older. I'm going to ask my final question, and it is, what does love mean to you?
Acceptance. I think that love, and also unconditional, it should be. Isn't that what we should all be doing, really? Isn't that all anybody wants? They just want to be accepted. They want to be validated. And if we weren't put here the way we are, who and how we are, and, it's like that thing I said earlier, what is the one commonality? It's the only thing that everybody has in common on this planet is the fact that we're all unique entities. So why is it that way if it's not how we're supposed to be? So we should be celebrated and celebrate ourselves. And that's what love is. It's like, you'll never stop war with more war or terror. It'll only fuel it. Love is the only thing that will conquer it. And, it has to start with men, because men are messed up in our society. Why do you think they limited women and gay men. You know, like why the word homosexual only appeared in the Bible in 1946. It was never there before. My mom did everything. She raised us. My dad, yes, was there, was an alcoholic until 14 months before he died. Yeah, he provided financially, but my mom worked full time as a nurse, 6 weeks of graveyard, 6 weeks of days. She never missed anything. Homework, a choir performance, a basketball. I don't know. I don't know how she did it. I don't know how she did it. I'm in awe of women. I just want to leave humanity better than I found it. And it's like, I don't want the next person that comes after me to have to deal with the shit I went through, because it sucks, and that's what we should all be doing. Everybody could do that. You don't know how much you'll change. It's the little gestures. Like, go listen to my "You're Not Alone" song. That song was all about that. We get all wrapped up in the world, and it's like people feel like they're alone, but really, we're connected, and we're all simple. We don't need all this stuff.
No, definitely.
I love to sit in nature.
Thank you, Patrick. I loved our conversation.
Yeah, thanks for letting me just talk. But